Hello, this is As the World Burns. I'm your host, Randall Burns. It is April 30th, 2021, and today's topic is the book, a review, How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis. Felix Dennis was one of the great entrepreneurs of the 20th century. He was a true rags to riches story. He basically started out as a hippie kid in London who founded a series of magazines in the computer industry and the men's magazine Maxim and became extraordinarily wealthy by this process. Not quite a billionaire, but extraordinarily wealthy. And he it's an autobiography where he details how he did it. And what the thing that one of the things I like about it is he doesn't glorify the process. He is very clear that getting rich is not a means to happiness, or at least getting rich the way he did it. And I would argue that he wasn't holistically rich, that he was financially obese. And he didn't develop himself in a balanced sense. Okay. That his spiritual development and physical development did not balance his economic development. But he decided at a very young age that he wanted to get rich, and he pursued this absolutely single-mindedly, and he did it. One of the stories he tells is about a girl that he was dating at a fairly young age, whose mother told him stay away from him, and he met the woman at a funeral many years later, and she walked up to him and said, "You did it." And he said, "I did what?" "You became really rich." And it turns out that this woman's mother had asked him at one point what he wanted to do, and he had said he wanted to get really rich. And she said, "I saw a fire in your eyes that scared me. I'd never seen it before." So that tells you something about Felix Dennis and how he started out and how he pursued this. And he details the competitive process and the predatory process, I think, very, very well. And he also details some of the places where it has to be limited to be functional. Because predators, if they prey too closely to home, sabotage themselves. They have to develop organizations to achieve their goals, and the wise ones learn to contain it at a certain level. But they also don't create communities, and they also very often do not keep much in the way of friends, and they have trouble making friends past a certain point. One of the most bitter men that I know in their relationships with women is a Silicon Valley billionaire. And I knew the man I got to meet him shortly after he got out of high school and saw the process. And this is somebody who went from a nerdy, could not get a date guy to being inundated with women more interested in their money than were with him. Okay. So now, one thing that Felix Dennis does explain is that getting rich did improve his sex life. But he did not say that it improved his love life. And there's an important difference there. But Felix Dennis explains how to be competitive. And that is not the only way in which riches are obtained, and may not be the way that riches are obtained on a mass level. And so I would read this book with precautionary if you choose to read it. I think there's value in it, but I also see it as a warning. And it's not one that I am personally inclined to emulate. I think there's other ways of going about it that are safer and are generally more applicable, and I will detail those at a later date. I think the book, now one thing, Felix Dennis was not just a entrepreneur, he was also a award-winning poet, and he actually developed that part of himself a lot towards the end of his life and won several awards for it. And the book is interspersed with his poetry, and I actually found it touching. And it details parts of a young man's life that a lot of people may not, people who've never had the competitive urge may not relate to real well. But I found it something that I could relate to, something, and I don't relate a lot to poetry. And I actually read one of his books of poetry afterwards. And I recommend the poetry also as an example to give you the window into the psyche of a type of person that you will encounter into the business world and that you may need to navigate around. But I do not recommend it as a roadmap in general for getting rich if you want to have a life as a whole person. Okay, it's kind of if you want to get rich at any price. And Felix Dennis, by his own standards, was not successful. He had an ambition to become a philanthropist at the end of his life. And he choked because he was so attached to his money that he couldn't let it go. Now, Andrew Carnegie, who was one of the wealthiest men in history, said that he had a lot more fun giving the money away than he did earning it. In his case, he was browbeaten by his mother, and that was what impelled him to become as wealthy as he did. But when his mother died, he had no attachment to the money, and he was able to let it go. Felix Dennis could not let it go, and by his own standards, failed. And I think that you need to read this whole thing with that in note. I mean, he does explain the competitive spirit. He does explain the levels of competition. The book has real value, in my opinion, for noting the types of competitors that win and don't. And it actually does kind of gauge pretty much the level of success that I've seen in people that operate on the competitive plane. It doesn't show the only way that people achieve financial independence or achieve financial goals. And I think there's a level there that's invisible to someone like Felix Dennis. Part of it is that some of the most truly rich people do not need to achieve the level of financial wealth that Felix Dennis did. And like I said, there is still value to the book, and I will be reviewing it along with others. But thank you for joining me. This is Randall Burns, As the World Burns, signing off.